The woman froze, her hand lightly pressing against her forehead. "Oh no, I didn't just," she muttered under her breath, her gaze fixed on the boy's body as it crumbled into ash, his essence dissipating into the still air like dust in the breeze. A frustrated sigh escaped her lips. "I didn't mean to." She looked down with a hint of regret, realizing what had just happened. She hadn't wanted to kill him. Not really. It was just that she got a little too emotional. Her eyes had narrowed without thinking, and apparently that was all it took. "How can someone be this fragile?" she murmured, rubbing her temple in irritation. She had been alone for far too long, and when a living soul finally appeared, it vanished in an instant. Raziel froze mid-breath, his eyebrow twitching uncontrollably. "What the hell? I'm pouring my heart into this speech, and she calls it boring? I'm doing it right, no lies. I even stripped it clean for her. She'll catch anything else." Despite the storm brewing inside him, he remained calm outwardly, his lips only hinting at the rage boiling beneath. "Let me introduce myself then," she said, a mischievous smirk curling on her lips as she rested her cheek on her hand. Raziel straightened his posture, his eyes narrowing as a glimmer of hope flickered. Finally, something's moving. His gaze locked onto her, calculating, eager to uncover the monster behind her calm exterior. This was the moment he'd learn her true nature, how to gain the upper hand, and most importantly, how to use her. Knowledge was power. She studied him intently, her gaze sharp, focused, as though calculating every detail. Not an illusion, not a clone, not some trick of time, no trace of any magic. She muttered to herself, sounding more like a scientist running through a mental checklist than a person. The body is real. Same soul. Exact presence. The conclusion came as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He revived. No shock, no surprise, no hesitation. Just a cold, precise observation. The calm of someone far too familiar with the extraordinary. It was pure analysis. A chilling curiosity devoid of emotion. Raziel, now with a strange new confidence, finally accepts that death is no longer a threat. His survival against the powerful enemy left him shaken, but the knowledge that revival is instant means there's no pressure, no shame anymore. But his rebirth comes with a cost. The woman, amused, watches him die once more, testing his limits. Her curiosity grows. "So, you really can revive," she says. Her intrigue clearly sparked as Raziel stands in stunned silence, left to wonder why it all happened again. Her gaze was sharp as she observed him again, a sense of calculation behind her words. "I assume you died before coming here, just like me?" She tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Though, I've never tried dying here, but considering I haven't aged in eons, I suppose it's impossible." Each word she spoke was deliberate, precise, almost too accurate. "If you didn't die in the real world, then it must be this strange place that makes you immortal. A sealed world. That would explain it." Raziel's mind raced. Did she just read my thoughts? He panicked, his eyes twitching in confusion. Or did she just guess all of that? How did she come so close to the truth in just a few seconds? He had no idea how she could be so accurate, not even considering the possibility that he might possess an artifact or divine item. She effortlessly skipped all the fluff, diving straight into what mattered. "You didn't read my mind, host," she said, her tone laced with a cool, precise authority. "This information is locked away. Your deductions? They're based on reading your micro-expressions and logic. Not everyone can do that, especially not someone with SSS rank villain skills. Her observational abilities? Unmatched." Raziel froze, the weight of her words sinking in. "She's a monster," he muttered, fear creeping into his voice. "How is this even fair?" His thoughts were cut short as her voice broke through again, smooth and unyielding. "Let me guess," she said, chin resting on her hand, her gaze piercing through him. "You could slip between worlds, right? You came here to grow stronger because, here, you can't die. No risks, just training and growth." She flashed a faint smirk. "And if you can convince me, you walk away with power, skills, and experience." Raziel stood frozen, his every thought laid bare under her gaze. She read him like an open book, a silent horror creeping through his mind. "That's it, I see." Her voice broke the stillness, sending a chill down his spine. She's reading my soul, Raziel thought, his insides twisting. She's dissecting me without even lifting a finger. Her sudden question snapped him back to reality. You really don't know who I am? She asked, her voice laced with something darker, almost predatory. Raziel stumbled over his words, his panic growing. And no, I know your title. It's not like I don't know anything, ma'am. He rushed to add, as if that would shield him from her scrutiny. Her laughter, low and amused, only made his discomfort worse. Title? She echoed, her fingers tapping her lips thoughtfully. I do have many, but if you know me, then you must know the greatest one. Her eyes, sharp and intense, locked onto his. So what is it? She asked, a dangerous curiosity flickering in the depths of her gaze. The title that endured through the ages, even after trillions of years, was none other than the strongest mother. Raziel, heart pounding, took a deep breath. It's the strongest mother. And just like that, the system chimed in. Host, you have died again. The armrest of her throne splintered under her grip, and her eyes, now pitch black and fathomless, burned with rage. You dare, she thundered. You dare mock me, kid. Raziel, freshly revived, blinked in confusion. What the hell just happened? His voice was flat, more bewildered than afraid. System, seriously, what's wrong with her? Does she have some kind of divine personality disorder or what? Raziel's frustration was palpable as he clenched his fists, holding back the urge to lash out. It's on its bullshit again, he muttered under his breath, seething with anger. He swore to himself that one day he'd land a punch on the system that kept messing with him. But even as he fumed, her words rang out in his mind, sharp and cutting like a blade. Did I say something wrong? Was that title incorrect? Panic crept up his spine, cold and unsettling. He realized the truth. This damned system had likely fed him lies just to mess with him. His gaze shifted, landing on her, seated on her throne, one armrest now crushed beneath her grip. She had done that, with nothing but her bare hand. He swallowed hard, unease crawling over him. And here I thought she might just be some magician, he thought, eyeing the throne as if it held all the answers. Raziel's gaze fixed on the strange object before him, his thoughts racing. The stone was no ordinary rock, more like a shard of divine marble or an artifact of incomprehensible power. Yet, there she was, crushing it effortlessly like clay. His mind recoiled, unable to reconcile what his eyes were telling him with what he understood about strength. She didn't seem physically imposing. But then again, looks could be deceiving. Raziel's instincts screamed for him to act quickly. Straightening his back, he took a moment to compose himself. He wasn't like the others, those who would grovel or beg for mercy. He wasn't some dog at her feet, calm, controlled. He met her eyes. I apologize if I offended you, ma'am. Please understand, I didn't realize that title was disrespectful. Every word was measured, precise, free from lies or half-truths. But he knew, deep down, she could see right through him. Raziel stood there, acknowledging the weight of his ignorance. His realization hit him like a cold truth. He had walked into the situation blind, without any knowledge. It was my own ignorance, nothing more, he admitted, his gaze lowering in a sign of sincerity. Not a bow, but an honest gesture. So please accept my apology. The woman in front of him remained silent, her expression unreadable, cold, and unmoving. Her eyes scanned his face, and for a brief moment, something shifted. Her gaze softened ever so slightly as she saw the truth in his words. I see, she murmured. Then, without warning, Raziel heard the chilling voice echo in his mind. Host, you have died again. What? Raziel's voice rang in his head as his body reformed once more. Confusion swirled in his mind. What the hell is wrong with this woman? Didn't I just apologize? Raziel's anger seethed under the surface as he struggled to maintain control. Is she seriously just playing with my life? He muttered, frustration evident in his voice. It was like being a mere pawn in her game, a toy in her twisted playground. His mind raced as he grappled with the unpredictable chaos of dealing with a villain who seemed utterly insane. He couldn't help but wonder if all high-rank villains were this unhinged, completely beyond reason. But he knew better than to show his frustration. There was no time for self-pity. Dying here was strange, no pain, just an eerie detachment, as if he were trying to remember a dream that vanished the moment he woke up. It was unsettling, yes, but manageable. Stepping forward, he steeled himself, trying to calm the volatile situation. "Ma'am, I think it would be best if we properly introduced ourselves," he said, attempting to break the tension. From her throne, she looked down at him with a newfound boredom, her gaze as cold and disinterested as ever. Raziel found himself caught in a whirlwind of unpredictable emotions. One moment, she was consumed by rage, and the next, she was completely indifferent. It was enough to make anyone tremble. Despite the shifting pressure, he pressed on. "Let me start," he said, his voice steady, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm Raziel, 16 years old, and I'm very good at." His words flowed with sincerity, the energy of his effort behind each one. He wasn't lying or exaggerating, just offering the best version of himself, hoping for some respect in return. But as he spoke, her disinterested yawn interrupted him, her delicate hand covering her mouth. All right, that's enough," she said, brushing him off with an ease that left him in a state of uneasy silence. Raziel paused mid-breath, his eyebrow twitching uncontrollably. What the hell? He thought, seething inwardly. I'm putting everything into this speech, and she calls it boring? I'm doing everything right, even stripped it clean of lies because I know she'll catch them. Yet, externally, he kept his cool, only the faintest twitch of his mouth betraying his frustration. Let me introduce myself then, she said, her smirk returning as she rested her cheek on her hand. Raziel straightened, adjusting his posture subtly. Finally. Something's happening, he thought, eyes narrowing as he focused on her. She seemed less murderous now, at least. This could be the moment he'd been waiting for, the moment he would finally understand what kind of monster she truly was, what made her tick, how to manipulate the situation to his advantage. Knowledge, power. Raziel had his eyes set on a skill or two, all within his reach if he just played his cards right. But then, everything came to a halt. She went completely silent. No expression, no breath, just motionless. Seconds passed, then more, and more. Raziel blinked in confusion. Did she freeze? He wondered. Still nothing. Did her system crash? Does she need a reboot? The silence stretched on, growing more uncomfortable with every second. He didn't dare move though, thinking that maybe standing still like a respectful statue was the right thing to do. But this was getting ridiculous, he whispered, barely moving. Hey, system! She didn't fall asleep with her eyes open, right? The voice of the system answered. She is thinking, host. His confusion deepened. Huh? Thinking about what? Wait, don't tell me, did she find some loophole? Is she trying to guess some absurd nonsense that somehow ends up being right? The system responded, No, host. She's contemplating very deeply. Impatient now, he snapped. Hurry up! Why are you pausing halfway through? The system answered. She's contemplating how to introduce herself. Silence hung thick in the air. His disbelief cut through it. What? Raziel blinked, his disbelief almost palpable. You're telling me that someone who can practically read my mind and guess exactly how I'm coming back to life can't even remember how to introduce herself? He scoffed. The system responded with a pause, offering an explanation. When someone reaches a certain level, introductions become obsolete. The world already knows them, and after that, saying your name feels strange. She probably hasn't had to introduce herself in tens of thousands of years. Raziel wasn't convinced. Bullshit, he muttered under his breath. Someone with that sharp of a mind, capable of predicting my revival, and she's out here struggling to remember her name? Not buying it. Raziel observed her with careful caution, the silence heavy between them. She remained still, her eyes locked on nothing, her thoughts hidden behind an inscrutable facade. Then, suddenly, her lips parted, breaking the stillness with a sharpness that pierced the air. To introduce myself? Her voice sliced through the silence, cold and unyielding. A strange, unsettling smile twisted at the corner of her lips, a smile that seemed to belong to someone who had long lost touch with sanity. Let me begin, she continued, her tone chilling. I am the mother who tried to kill her own newborn daughter by my own hands. A pause hung in the air, thick with tension. Then her smile widened, an icy grin that seemed to freeze the very soul. But I failed. Raziel, standing rigidly, had expected some grand proclamation, some awe-inspiring revelation. But the words hit him like a blow, far more crushing than any blade or magic strike could have been. His breath caught in his chest as if the very air had been stolen from him. His soul trembled. What kind of introduction was this? His thoughts reeled. No one introduces themselves like this. This wasn't villainous. It was beyond monstrous. His stomach twisted, and a chill ran up his spine as the image formed in his mind. A barely breathing baby, helpless, with a mother, her own mother, trying to... He couldn't even finish the thought. Is this what I have to become, system? Is this the kind of monster I'm supposed to emulate to be a villain? If it is, then I'd rather not. I don't care what this place is or how powerful she is. Get me out. Now. She disgusts me. His voice echoed within the void of his mind, cold and firm. Hear her out fully, host. She must have had her reasons. No one does anything without one. Raziel stood there, his gaze unwavering, as the words echoed in his mind. Every action, no matter how dark, has a cause, even the smallest moments. But he couldn't bring himself to accept this notion, not after what she'd just said. He shook his head, his voice steady but filled with disgust. No reason could justify the venom she spewed. He didn't care what she was, whether divine or demonic, her presence repelled him, and he would rather walk away than learn anything from her. But she was unyielding, coldly insisting that understanding would come only if he stopped acting like a child. No one was born evil, not even villains. He clenched his fists, clenching his jaw so tightly it ached. Then explain it, he growled, his voice low, a storm barely contained. Explain how mercy becomes cruelty, how love twists into betrayal. If there's a reason, any reason, then say it now, because to me, it looks like choice. It looks like enjoyment. She woke up to a world that felt strange. For 4 days, she was lost to exhaustion. When her eyes finally opened, her husband was gone, and so was the home she had known. The caretaker informed her that she had given birth to a daughter, but her husband and his family had no use for a girl. They told her to clean up the mess and return as if nothing had happened. Even her own mother insisted she do the same. Weakened and fragile, she still went. She saw her daughter for the first time and held her in her arms. Time stood still, and she couldn't remember how long she stayed there, just standing, as a cold, heavy image lingered in her mind. The air turned cold, almost as if time itself had frozen in that moment. The words she spoke painted a scene he had never lived, yet he could almost feel it: biting winds, fragile limbs, and a child unwanted from the start. His chest tightened as the weight of the emotion seeped in, tangled, ugly, and undeniably real. She spoke with a calm that felt wrong, like the calm before an explosion. I couldn't do it, she confessed, her voice steady, too steady. I couldn't kill her with my own hands. Her expression was an empty mask, only the silence between them speaking louder than any words could. It was a silence that had lived inside her for years, never fading, always there, a reminder of something never forgotten. So I took her outside. She continued, her voice softer now. It was winter. The frost had settled in, cold enough to freeze even thoughts. No one was home. They had all left, maybe thinking I would do what they couldn't say aloud. That night, I left my daughter out in the cold. The final words hung in the air, thick with a chilling weight. Raziel sat there, numb to the freezing cold, staring at the doorstep where she lay, vulnerable in the snow. He could only wait, unable to move, hoping she'd succumb to the bitter frost. Somehow, he dozed off in that unnatural stillness, the chilling silence wrapping around him. When morning came, fear gripped him. He dreaded what he'd find outside, terrified of the consequences of his inaction. Her voice, unwavering, held no sign of the turmoil he expected. And yet, when he stepped outside, she was still there, standing before him as if nothing had happened. Lying in the snow, unconscious, half buried in frost, yet still breathing, she was a sight that pierced the soul. Her skin, blue from head to toe, told a chilling tale of death's grip, but she was alive. Raziel turned away, his face tightening, struggling to push the horrifying image out of his mind. A baby, frozen, dying, but somehow still holding on to life. The weight of failure crashed over him as he whispered, "I failed." Her voice, tinged with raw emotion, cut through the silence. "I failed to kill my daughter." The words hung in the air, heavy with regret, but then a subtle shift. Her tone softened, not with gentleness, but with resolve. But then, I thought, if my daughter could fight death for an entire night, why couldn't I fight for her? Just once. She wondered aloud, her voice betraying a flicker of regret. Why was I so desperate to give up? Why was returning to that family more important than my own child? Her eyes grew distant as she pondered. What was I thinking back then? And then, without warning, she stood up, her posture casual, as if speaking of something trivial. "So I killed them all," she said flatly. "My husband, my mother, my in-laws, everyone who told me to kill her." In that moment, Raziel's mind was torn apart, like a bone snapping. The pity he had started to feel shattered into a confusing mess. What was this? Just moments ago, he was teetering on the edge of understanding her, a shift from disgust to pity? Sympathy? Damn it, how did it happen so suddenly? Am I seriously losing control? She had tried to kill her daughter. That fact remained unchanged. Raziel couldn't deny the feeling stirring inside him, though he knew he shouldn't feel this way. Still, what choice did she have back then? The thought lingered, subtle but persistent. Did that make him corrupt too? His fist tightened, his chest tightening with unease. He couldn't make sense of it, but he stayed silent, listening as her story continued. "I began raising my daughter," she said, her voice calm yet steady. "In the middle of her growing up, I needed financial support. I decided to open a shop in the city with the last bit of money I had saved for my family." A quiet pride echoed in her words, despite their flat tone. "But then, some people came. Holy ones! They told me I couldn't open a shop because there was a statue of their god next to it." Raziel exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Poor woman," he muttered under his breath, already recognizing the all-too-familiar trope. "I know this routine too well. The holy crap in novels always signals someone's about to suffer." He could already predict the story unfolding, being forced to shut everything down, left with nothing but misery, all while claiming some holy cause. How original, he sighed, already bored with her tragic fate. But then she spoke. "So," she said, blinking slowly. "The next day, I moved their statue to the outskirts." Raziel froze, eyes wide. A beat passed. Then, he couldn't help but chuckle, forcing a hand to his face. Gods, what was I expecting? She wasn't the protagonist, she was the villain. Of course, she'd do that. Still, a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Those pompous holy knights must have been seething. "So they called me a witch," she shrugged, continuing, "and said they'd exorcise me. So, I killed them too." And just like that, the story of her chaos unfolded, as ruthless as it was relentless. She spoke as though recounting an ordinary event, not drama, not tragedy, just a continuation. Over time, these small things kept happening. Then, one day, an emperor's son tried to touch my daughter. She paused, almost nonchalant. "So, I killed him too." Raziel blinked slowly, trying to process what he just heard. "Wait, what?" That escalated quickly. "Well, it was just boring stuff. They came, I fought, I killed. Never lost, not once," she said, the words devoid of pride, almost flat. And then I thought. Zara Raverin stood before Raziel, her gaze cold, her tone a sharp contrast to the violence in her words. "Why not help women with the same fate as mine? Let them get their own justice." So I taught them too, how to get stronger. She let her words sink in before adding with chilling calm, "I've destroyed daughters, sons, grandsons, grandparents. Whoever stood in my way." Her voice was steady, almost like a matter-of-fact observation. "In my lifetime, I have killed trillions of people." With those final words, she met Raziel's eyes, as if daring him to react. "And my name is Zara Raverin." She paused. "That's all about me." Full introduction. Her silence followed, thick with the weight of her confession. Raziel, stunned and speechless, stood frozen, his mind scrambling to process the enormity of her revelation. How could anyone go through hell and come out not just surviving, but thriving with the weight of such power? His words echoed in the stagnant air, weighted with desperation. For once, he wasn't twisting his words or playing games of nobility or mystery. There was no time left for pointless formalities. He needed to grow stronger now. The outside world awaited, where the only way to gather elemental cores was by hunting true monsters. If he failed in this, failure would be his end. And that was unacceptable. She hadn't shared much about herself, so he remained silent as well, her indifference mirroring his own. Yet, even in her indirect way, she had changed the way he saw things, even if only by the faintest of shifts. Philosophy meant little to him, but there was no denying it. Things had changed. Raziel's words hung in the stale air, heavy with meaning. For once, he wasn't hiding behind cryptic phrases or pretending to be noble. He had no time left for games. He needed to grow stronger now. There was still so much to do, still a world to conquer, full of true monsters and their elusive elemental cores. Failure wasn't an option. His gaze shifted towards Zara, who had given little away about herself, and he mirrored her indifference. Yet, despite her cryptic ways, she had altered his perception, however subtly. Even though philosophy meant little to him, something about her had sparked a shift, no matter how small. Without power, a philosopher is no different from a fool lost in his own noise. Strength is truth. All else is just noise. The woman tilted her head, finally catching the weight of his words. Oh, that? Number I don't have anything to teach you, she said flatly, a smile on her face that was more venom than warmth. You don't look like teaching material. Her voice coiled around the words like a lazy blade. And more than that, she leaned in, eyes narrowing. I didn't see even a sliver of true respect in your gaze. Raziel blinked slowly. You wanted to walk away before even listening to me fully, didn't you? Her words struck sharp, mocking, cold. That's not the behavior of someone talented. Not someone worth investing in. And then, just like that. Nope. Final. Absolute. Silence descended, thick and oppressive, like a blanket over the room. This woman, Raziel thought, his jaw tightening, his eyes flickering with irritation. If she'd meant to say no from the start, why drag it out with all the theatrics? Why waste his time with her cryptic, drawn-out speech? He could have been elsewhere by now, securing allies or extracting secrets from some other villain. Instead, he was stuck here, fuming, wishing nothing more than to curse her. His hand twitched, as if the urge to strike out were so strong it could shatter the stillness. But then, just as the impulse surged, her expression shifted. It was subtle at first, like a glitch. Then her face twisted into a cruel, predatory grin. Something wicked had sparked in her mind. Wait, wouldn't he make the perfect experiment? She thought, her eyes glowing with manic excitement as her pupils dilated, and a dark plan began to form. The grin on her face wasn't just unsettling, it was the kind of smile a villain wears before they tear someone's life apart. Twisted, sadistic, inevitable. What could I even do to you? She asked, her smirk never faltering. You can't die here, right? You just revive over and over. So, what's there to be afraid of? Raziel clenched his jaw. She wasn't wrong. And trust me, she continued, her voice a smooth yet sharp whisper. If it works out, it'll benefit you immensely. Raziel's eyes darkened. What do you mean if it works out? He questioned. You're not planning to use me for some twisted experiment and call it teaching, are you? He stepped back, not out of fear, but a wary respect for the danger she posed. That smile on her face wasn't just unsettling. It was the kind of grin a villain wears right before they tear someone's world apart. Twisted, sadistic, inevitable. What could I even do to you? She shrugged, the smirk never leaving her face. You can't die here, right? You just come back to life over and over. So why the fear? Raziel clenched his jaw. She wasn't wrong. And believe me, she added, her voice as smooth as silk but sharp as a blade. If it works out, it'll be very advantageous for you. His gaze darkened. What do you mean, if it works out? You're not planning on running some experiment on me and calling it training, are you? He asked, stepping back not in fear, but with wary respect. Raziel's eyes darted into the endless void, his mind reaching out. System, what is she planning? He demanded. I have no idea, host. This entity's behavior falls outside all recorded functions. The system responded. He clicked his tongue in frustration. Useless. But then he paused, mulling it over. Even if she experimented on him, what could really go wrong? It's not like he'd die. Not for good, at least. And even if he did, so what? What mattered was power. Right now, he was weak, laughably weak. At the lowest point in every important category. No skills, no techniques, no resources. Raziel had made up his mind. Whatever it took, he'd face it head on. Pain? Suffering? If it was the price to unlock the knowledge of an SSS-ranked villain, so be it. But just as his resolve settled, a voice sliced through his thoughts. How about this, she said, a mischievous tone threading through her words. Let me show you something. Break this, and I'll teach you my strongest technique. With a snap of her fingers, she smirked. But if you fail, you'll face the experiment. Her grin widened, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a game. For you, it's a win, either way. For me, it'll be fun. Her eyes gleamed, the look of a predator watching its prey, and Raziel felt a lump form in his throat. Raziel stood firm, resolving that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head on. Pain? Suffering? If it was the price to unlock the knowledge of an SSS-ranked villain, then he would pay it. Just as this resolve settled within him, her voice pierced through the air, filled with a mischievous undertone. How about this? She said, her words sharp and playful. Let me show you something. If you can break it. She snapped her fingers. I'll teach you my strongest, ultimate technique. Raziel froze. But her smile only deepened as she added, but if you fail, her grin widened. You'll go through the experiment instead. Her tone was casual, almost as if she were talking about a simple game, as if she were toying with something she knew would break. For you, it's a win either way, she continued, her eyes glinting like a predator eyeing a prey that couldn't escape. And for me, it'll just be a bit of fun. Raziel's throat tightened as he faced the chilling choice before him. He took a deep breath, eyes narrowing with intense focus. Wasn't this the ultimate key to his success? With his dark genius and cursed affinity, he could become unstoppable. A villain, the kind of force that could crush anyone in his path. No matter how tough it was to learn, he would master it. His true challenge wasn't his talent, it was the lack of skills and powers he could access. He'd been stuck in a desert of mediocrity, starving for more power. But this could change everything. He could feel his heart race. Will you really? The question trembled in the air as he fought to keep his voice steady, but greed had already taken root in his expression. His eyes burned with an insatiable hunger, his lips twitching under the weight of 1,000 thoughts. Saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth, and with a swift motion, he wiped it away. The face of that smug protagonist flashed before his eyes, Aaron, that righteous fool. If Raziel had that ability, he'd wipe the floor with them all, the women too. Maybe then they'd see how wrong they were about him. No, forget them. He didn't care. Shameless? Maybe. But who would ever know? And even if they did, who cares? The system's voice buzzed in his mind, trying to lecture him on manners, acting like some half-baked etiquette coach. Raziel ignored it completely. I promise. Of course I do, he said with a slight nod, his tone casual, almost too much so. But then her expression darkened, her eyes turning sharp and cold. I want more than words, she replied. I want you to swear on this space itself that no matter what happens, you won't leave this dimension until my experiment is complete. You will not back out. Her tone shifted abruptly, seriousness replacing the playful air from before. Her gaze now held a silent authority, one that seemed to dismiss Raziel as little more than an amusing distraction, her eyes flickering with disdain, as if he was beneath her. Raziel, inwardly clicking his tongue, couldn't help but feel insulted. He held his tongue, though, keeping his irritation in check. He coughed softly, then straightened his posture, deciding to proceed cautiously. I'll see. Show me what I'm supposed to break, he said, narrowing his eyes. He wondered if she might ask him to break something as ridiculous as a mountain. With a sweet tone, she agreed, snapping her fingers. In an instant, a strange movement caught his attention. A black stone near his foot, previously unnoticed, began to shift, its form twisting unnaturally as it seemed to liquefy. It bubbled like tar, but gleamed like polished obsidian, rising through the air as if it were alive, stopping just before his face. Raziel was taken aback. What was this? Break something I can't even see? And she thinks I'll believe she'll give me her ultimate technique just like that? He thought, his gaze never leaving her. His voice, now firm and cold, pierced the air. Are you sure? Of course, kid, she replied, casting him a sideways glance. But don't forget what you promised. You agree, and I'll give you my technique if you succeed. If not, then you'll experiment on me, Raziel finished dryly. The weight of it hit him instantly. This was no simple test. It was a trap, an insidious challenge laced with cruelty. A joke only villains would laugh at. But despite the warning sign screaming in his head, he found himself nodding. He didn't care anymore. Suspicion? It didn't matter. The gamble had already been made. Raziel squinted, his gaze narrowing as he examined the space between the two poles. At first, he saw nothing. But then, as his focus sharpened, he caught it a single, impossibly thin black thread stretched taut between them. It was so fine, so nearly invisible, it seemed like a trick of the light. You mean this? He asked, pointing at the fragile line. This thread? She smiled, nodding. Yes, break it, and I'll keep my word. Raziel exhaled slowly, already sensing something was off. To make it easier for you, she teased, her voice light. How about I make it 1,000 times thinner? Raziel stood, eyes locked on the metallic thread, but before he could protest, it began to shimmer and rapidly thin. The thread dissolved right in front of him, vanishing into thin air. He was left in darkness, unable to see a thing. System! He growled inwardly, frustration bubbling up. Is she messing with me? The system responded, calm and certain. I do not believe so, host. People of her caliber have no reason to bluff, especially not with someone like you. That last part stung, and Raziel couldn't help but twitch, but he held his tongue. She hadn't moved, remaining still, waiting. Is this even possible? What kind of game is this? He thought, his mind racing. Raziel stood firm, his voice resolute as he muttered a promise. The moment the words escaped his lips, a sinister, knowing grin stretched across Zara's face. It wasn't just any grin, it was the kind only a seasoned villain could pull off, one that oozed danger, satisfaction, and a touch of mockery, like watching a fly walk right into the spider's web. But Raziel didn't falter. Why had he said it so quickly, without a second thought? The answer was clear. The ultimate technique of an SSS-ranked villain was a temptation too great to resist. He reasoned with himself. If he won, he'd get the technique. If he lost, she'd still get some use out of him with her experiment. Either way, it was a win-win situation. He had been leaning toward agreeing ever since she first proposed the challenge. Now, faced with the challenge, it was a matter of proving his worth or facing the consequences of failure. The thread of fate was already set, and Raziel had no choice but to follow it to the end. Raziel stood resolute. He had made a promise, and there was no turning back. The challenge Zara Ravarern laid before him was one he could not refuse. After all, the ultimate technique of an SSS-ranked villain was far too tempting. As the words left his mouth, a wicked grin appeared on Zara's face. It was the kind of smile only a seasoned villain could wear, dangerous, knowing, and laced with a condescending satisfaction, as though she already saw his fate sealed. Why had he agreed so easily? It was simple. If he succeeded, the technique was his. If he failed, the experiment she promised would still benefit him in some way. Either way, it seemed like a win. The stakes were high, but Raziel was already leaning toward accepting when she first proposed the challenge. But as he stood there, facing the thread so thin, so delicate, yet so impossible to break, he wondered if he had truly understood the magnitude of the test that awaited him. Raziel couldn't help but smirk as he surveyed the situation. It all seemed so easy, almost laughable. Sure, there was a hint of suspicion, but villains had a way of tripping themselves up, right? Their arrogance often made them their own undoing. Maybe this one would be no different, he mused. A hair-thin thread? Please. That was nothing. It was 1,000 times thinner than anything he had ever dealt with. A piece of cake. And as for that promise, he didn't take it seriously. After all, this was a space controlled by the system, and he was its host. Who cared about promises in a place like this? If things went south, he could always bail. That thought gave him the confidence he needed, the feeling of invincibility. But then, a system notification hit him like a punch to the gut. Host has made a binding verbal contract with SSS rank Villain Zara Raverin under the authority of the system. The spatial domain acknowledges this promise. Should either party attempt to violate it, the system will intervene to enforce compliance. Raziel's smirk faded, his eyes wide with realization. His face dropped. His heart skipped a beat. The fuck? For a moment, he was frozen, the question marks in his mind floating like confetti. That's a thing? Why didn't anyone mention it? Across from him, Zara blinked, then erupted into laughter, her joy filling the space like an explosion. It was wild and untamed, a victorious cackle echoing through the void. She threw her head back, showing no restraint in her amusement. It was as if she just pulled off the perfect prank, and now she was savoring the moment. My guess was right, she practically sang, gasping between her laughs. It worked! It actually worked! Ha 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 ha! The genuine amusement in her voice was almost sharp, like a reminder of just how little he truly understood. Raziel could already see it in the way his expression crumbled the instant the system's voice spoke. He no longer needed confirmation. His face had already given everything away. Trapped. His situation was clear. He looked as if he just swallowed something sharp, the kind that could pierce even his most composed demeanor. Frantically, he raged in his mind, questioning the system. Why hadn't it warned him? What was this mysterious connection between Zara and the system? What's going on? Why does she know more than I do? He demanded, but the system's response was cold and mechanical. It reminded him that there were hidden functions he hadn't unlocked, features meant for his advantage, though not without risks. And then the revelation hit. The system wasn't biased. It didn't align with anyone but him. Zara had discovered the truth on her own. A tense silence followed, the weight of his predicament pressing down as he struggled to make sense of it all. Raziel felt the weapon's weight settle into his palm, the blade gleaming with deadly precision. Zara's eyes narrowed, intrigued by the weapon's lack of energy signature. No trace of magic or spatial disturbance. A sly grin curled on her lips. Here we go. Let's not waste time. Raziel steadied himself, his stance firm as he gripped the axe tightly, feeling the surge of power. The thread, almost invisible, seemed to float in the air, but he calculated his position carefully. He wasn't lacking in strength, despite not having any magical skills. Years of intense physical training had pushed his body to its limits. I don't need magic to win, he thought, his determination unwavering. But as he made his move, he was unprepared for the incomprehensible material of the thread, his weapon shattering as he failed the challenge. Raziel had never felt pressure quite like this before, not from his own power, but from his mind. The calm confidence he usually wore was starting to slip away, replaced by unease. He hadn't even started the challenge yet, right? Surely he could back out, right? But the system had already bound him. The contract was set, and escape was impossible. His fists clenched at his sides as the weight of his mistake sank in. He was officially in deep trouble. No time for questions about how she knew his thoughts or her methods. There was no room for distractions now. I can use weapons, right? He asked, his voice edged with the anxiety of knowing this challenge might be far beyond what he'd anticipated. Raziel raised his gaze to Zara, a flicker of unease passing through his eyes. He half expected her to slyly suggest, "Do it with your hands." But his mind raced, calculating the impossibility of the task. Even though the thread appeared impossibly fine, there was no way something that thin could withstand the tension. It's just a diamond, right? He reasoned. Even something as strong as that couldn't hold up at this length. If the thread were shorter, it might be difficult to break. But at 10 meters, no chance. The thought of snapping it with his bare hands crossed his mind, but he pushed it aside. He'd try whatever he could. You can use any weapon, Zara said, her voice dripping with amusement as though watching a fool struggle with a simple puzzle. But just one shot! Any more would be a waste of time. Raziel's brow furrowed, a mixture of relief and confusion washing over him. She hadn't cheated him out of his weapon, but her words carried an unsettling weight that made him question the true meaning behind them. Raziel stood there, his attention completely fixed, stepping closer as his focus sharpened. He didn't waste words, not giving her the satisfaction of any further reply. Instead, he locked his gaze on the task ahead. System, I expect a weapon. After all, this is training. A response came. Of course, host. But the weapon will be of normal grade. Higher tier items must be earned either by defeating enemies or personal effort. You can request a type, though, if it exists in the real world. Only normal grade, huh? Raziel wasn't deterred. That's fine. I just need something decent. His voice remained firm, though cautious. Give me a thick axe, full sharpness. No hesitation, no uncertainty. The instant his command finished, a gleaming axe materialized in his hands, summoned from the air like a ghostly apparition, ready for whatever came next. Raziel gripped the weapon, feeling its weight settle into his palm as the blade gleamed with deadly precision. Zara's eyes narrowed, intrigued by the weapon's appearance. Not a trace of energy or spatial disturbance had marked its arrival, no signature, nothing at all. Her lips curved into a sly grin. This was interesting. Let's get started, Raziel said, steadying himself before the nearly invisible black thread. The axe vibrated in his hands, a hum of power coursing through it as he squared his stance. The thread, thin and dark as a shadow, seemed almost unreal in the air. But Raziel had already calculated its position, its arc, the distance, and the precise angle. His thoughts were clear. The system might limit his abilities, but his body and mind had been sharpened to the peak of human potential after 5 years of relentless training. Magic was unnecessary. He didn't need it to win. His muscles twitched, every fiber coiling with tension as he raised the axe, preparing for his strike. I'm going to defeat her, he muttered to himself, determination in his eyes. With a mighty swing, the axe descended, its sharp blade cutting through the air with the power of a storm. A soft, almost delicate sound rang out, a perfect slice through the atmosphere. As he watched the axe pass through with ease, Raziel's eyes narrowed in satisfaction. I guess I won, he whispered, relief washing over him. The blade had passed cleanly through the thread, without a hitch. Had it gotten stuck, the recoil could have caused serious harm, but this time, victory was his. The ultimate skill of an SSS rank villain. It's mine, he thought, excitement bubbling in his chest. Yet just as he was savoring the moment, a voice interrupted him. Hey, what are you smiling about? At least look down, kid. Zara's smug tone rang out, snapping him back to reality. Something did get cut, but not what you think. Zara's words echoed in the tense silence. Raziel's gaze dropped to his hands, his eyes wide in disbelief. His axe, once a solid weapon, was now split clean through the middle, its head severed as if it had met something impossibly sharp, something beyond his comprehension. What the hell? He muttered, his voice barely a whisper, the shock clear in his trembling hands. Zara's laughter broke the stillness, a mocking chuckle that only deepened his confusion. I guess I won, she teased, her gaze fixed on his stunned expression. Raziel could barely find his voice. How did you... His question trailed off, the disbelief heavy in his chest as he stared at the wreckage of his weapon. In his mind, he reached out for answers. Did she use some kind of trick? Magic? Illusion? Anything? But the answer was clear. The number. It was not some underhanded method. It was something else entirely. He couldn't believe it. She wasn't bluffing. Her confidence wasn't just for show. She had the power to back it up. His fists clenched, and he felt the weight of his decision settle in. There was no turning back now. He stood there, frozen, jaw tight, eyes narrowed, his chest rising and falling with attention. What is this material? He demanded, his voice sharp, a hint of cold curiosity beneath the frustration. Without warning, the two poles holding the thread began to melt, turning into a dark, fluid mass that slithered through the air, moving with an eerie purpose, as though it followed its own rules. Zara raised her hands, and the fluid hovered just above her palms. It shifted, folding, compressing, until it solidified into a gleaming, flawless cube alien, beautiful and perfect. This, she said, her eyes glowing faintly as they reflected the blackness in the cube, is a material I created after trillions of years of boredom. He stood frozen, a bitter realization sinking in. She wasn't bluffing. She truly had that much confidence for a reason. His fists clenched as the weight of the moment pressed on him. There was no turning back now. Jaw tight, eyes narrowing, chest rising and falling with the weight of resignation, he asked coldly, "What is this material?" The poles holding the thread began to melt, the dark liquid swirling through the air like ink bleeding into water, moving as if obeying a silent command. Zara raised her hands, and the fluid hovered above her palms, folding and compressing until it became a perfect, polished cube. Flawless. Alien. This, she said, a fond glint in her eyes as she gazed at the cube, is a material I created after trillions of years of boredom. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflections of darkness flickering within. The most perfect, and at the same time, the most terrible material I know. She smiled. I call it obsidian agony.